What a weekend of Big Ten football. The final full weekend in October is now in the books. Welcome to your Week 9 post-game show right here on Big Ten Breakdown. I am Ben Stevens. All of this, of course, a part of the I-80 Club. That is I-80 Club. Make sure you are following, you are liking, you are subscribing on all of the socials and wherever you get your favorite shows in podcast form. That's Apple, that's Spotify, etc. Of course, I hope you are watching on YouTube as well. If you want all of this great content, our Week 9 post-game show, our Week 10 pre-game show for the opening Saturday in the month of November, and everything the I-80 Club is doing advertisement free, it's patreon.com/I-80. That's I-80 Club. All right, let's dive into week number 9 around the Big Ten Conference. I am wearing a hat called the Lodge of one of my favorite bars in the world in Chicago, Illinois, in the heart of Big Ten country, and you could feel it here to end out the month of October as we're breaking down on the Week 9 pregame show. 7 conference tilts this weekend, a separation Saturday of sorts with the additional wrinkle of importance and significance each and every week, but here at the end of October, because as we get deeper and deeper into conference play, we will have separation of true Big Ten title contenders, the national perspective of a college football playoff hopeful, and the national championship aspirations for teams within this league, many of them on display here on the final Saturday of October. So in the Week 9 post-game show, as we do each and every week, our 4 distinct honors, our 4 down honors for the 4 best things we saw from the weekend that was in terms of football in the Big Ten Conference. No breaking news to guess or speculate or report, just a matter of time, it seems, for a few head coaches within this league. So we dive right in to our first down honor, the best thing we saw this weekend in the Big Ten, and that continues to be the number 2 team in the nation, the Indiana Hoosiers, who have built a completely different program in Bloomington, and the resurgence of IU football on full display on Saturday afternoon at the Rock. First down honors for Indiana because there are no days off for this IU team, and there are no days off for utter dominance for Curt Cignetti and company, hammering UCLA 56-6. It is part of the mentality that has been instilled in the losingest program ever in the history of college football, the Indiana Hoosiers, to completely flip that narrative in fewer than 2 years to make them the number 2 team in the country, receiving first place votes, and rightfully so, in the AP Top 25. A 50-point victory once again for Indiana, their second 50-plus point win over a Big Ten foe this season. And this was a UCLA team that entered Saturday in Bloomington on a 3-game win streak, a completely different team mentality-wise as well for the Bruins from the opening month of the year. And part of that mentality is the belief that is instilled into Indiana's team by Curt Cignetti, who never rests and is never satisfied. And he exemplifies that in his program, the praise of UCLA in his pre-game week press conference, in each and every second and detailed minutia of every operation for his football team leading up to the preparation of game day and certainly throughout the game. And we saw that from the very jump. On the second offensive snap from scrimmage, Nico Iamaleava intercepted by the stud all-Big Ten linebacker for Indiana, Aiden Fisher. He took that back for a touchdown from about 25 yards out. Indiana took a lead, 7-0 on defense in the opening minute of the game, and that was basically all she wrote. One of the great things for what UCLA had done on the 3-game win streak had been the offensive creativity rushing the football led by Jerry Neuheisel. UCLA had put up at least a $193 on the ground in all 3 consecutive wins, averaging 233 yards per game. But our key matchup was, could UCLA continue to have that production on the ground against Indiana, the Big Ten's best rushing defense? The answer to that was a flat-out no. Indiana held UCLA to just 88 yards on the ground, 3.5 yards per carry. And it wasn't a dazzling day by any means for Fernando Mendoza. Only 168 yards through the air and 3 touchdowns to go along with an interception, hit off the helmet of a lineman and was knocked up into the air and picked off. But he did have 45 rushing yards on the ground and a touchdown, 4 total touchdowns for your Heisman Trophy frontrunner and favorite entering the month of November. His brother, the backup quarterback for Indiana, Alberto Mendoza, had a rushing touchdown as well. These set of brothers have thrown for touchdowns in multiple games for the same team this year. They have also now ran for a touchdown each in the same game for the same team this year. That's got to be record books somewhere around the country in college football. And we see this, and the reason that Indiana, not just for a 50-point win against a team sub 500 in UCLA, despite the 3-game win streak for the Bruins coming to a close, we give first down honors to Indiana because of that dominant performance and leaving no doubts and answering every single question you could potentially bring up for Indiana football. And as we know, the Hoosiers have faced basically every sort of criticism that a team that once was the lovable loser, now upsetting the apple cart and being that dominant team in one of the brands in premier programs in college football. It is that very reason that Indiana earns first down honors, because there are sleepy spots across the schedule for every team and every major conference each and every week, especially into the heart of October, into early November. Spots you don't think will put you on upset alert. Even if you don't lose the game outright, you don't look your best, you don't look ultra competitive, the game is more tightly contested than anybody anticipates. Indiana, in large part, has said none of that. 18-0 now as the favored side under Curt Cignetti, with an average margin of victory better than 36 points per game, and they are 13-5 against the number when booked as a favorite. They are leaving no doubt. The catchphrase of the current time, belt to you-know-what, that's what Indiana does. And as we see teams around the country, for instance, Alabama having to rally in the fourth quarter to beat a struggling South Carolina team on the road. We saw Miami just last weekend, the number 2 team in the country at the time, as a 2-touchdown home favorite against Louisville get knocked off. Indiana doesn't really fall to that. And again, we can question them based on 2024 against the best of the best. I think they have answered that question in growth and improvement within the program, with the road win at Oregon, still in my estimation, the best win in the country so far this season. Maybe Alabama against Georgia gets some of that credit, but for me, it's still Indiana and maybe the best win in program history for IU football. Indiana leaves no doubts, and that's why they earn first down honors for the performance put up in the 50-point win for a second time in Big Ten action against UCLA on Saturday. Second down honors go to one-sided rivalry games for both Iowa taking home and keeping Floyd of Rosedale in Iowa City, and Michigan knocking off Michigan State and retaining Paul Bunyan for a 4th consecutive year. We start in Kinnick. Iowa absolutely hammers Minnesota in the battle for the pig, the Floyd of Rosedale trophy, the 98.3-pound pure bronze hog on the trophy. And Iowa left zero doubt as well, winning that game by 38 points, 41-3, the largest margin of victory for Iowa in this series, meeting for the 119th time against the Gophers on Saturday. Largest margin of victory for the Hawks since 2008. And one of the best first-half performances, not just in this rivalry matchup, but that you will see across the country, frankly, on any level of football. Iowa absolutely hammered Minnesota in the opening half for a 31-zip lead. Iowa scored on its first drive of the game. Mark Gronowski, the Hawkeyes quarterback, making history as we predicted. 11th rushing touchdown of the year, matching Wilburn Hollis and the Iowa program record for the most rushing scores by a quarterback in a single season, set way back in 1960. Mark Gronowski has scored in all 8 games he has played for Iowa in his Hawkeyes career. 8 consecutive then is a Big Ten record for the most rushing touchdowns by a quarterback in a game consecutively. That's what Mark Gronowski did on the very first drive for the Hawks. Second drive, they get a field goal. First drive following that, defensively, Zach Lutmer picks off Drake Lindsay, takes it back to the house for a pick 6. Then the following offensive drive for Iowa, passing touchdown for Mark Gronowski to Reese Vanderzee. His first passing score, by the way, in Big Ten play for Mark Gronowski. Then after that, Caden Weegan, a 50-yard punt return touchdown. His second of the year. He is one of 3 FBS players, is Weegan, the speedster, with multiple punt return touchdowns this season. Also has a receiving and rushing score this year as well. Iowa got it done in every single way. a passing and rushing touchdown, a field goal converted from Drew Stevens, a defensive touchdown, and a special teams touchdown. Literally all three phases personified in dominant fashion. They outgained Minnesota to win the Pig, 274 to 133 in terms of total yards. What did the Golden Gophers do exemplary last week against Nebraska? 9 sacks. Iowa's offensive line, maybe the best in the country, if not the best by themselves, one of the three best. You know what? No. Iowa has the best offensive line in college football, only allowing 2 sacks. Iowa's D-line had 4 sacks as well. And Iowa is off to a 4-1 start in Big Ten play. The best start for Kirk Ferentz and company through 5 Big Ten games to begin a season since way back in 2015. And because of how Iowa is playing, they are setting up significant stages. They have a bye the opening weekend of November, and then November 8th, a Saturday in Kinnick, Iowa will host Oregon in a critical game, and maybe the biggest game in Iowa City in quite some time, in recent memory for sure, for the Iowa Hawkeyes. That is what Iowa gets to look forward to. Rest up on the bye. We correct things and get better because of the result and the performance against the Gophers. In their 2 rivalry games in the last 3 weeks, the Hawkeyes hammer Wisconsin in Camp Randall in Madison, 37-zip. And then they beat Minnesota by 38 points at home, 41-3. We are going to talk about Iowa and Washington and their perspective in the AP Top 25 in just a matter of moments. Second Down Honors continues with our second one-sided rivalry performance as the number 25 team in the country, now moving up in the AP poll inside of the top 20. Michigan beats Michigan State in dominant fashion inside Spartan Stadium in East Lansing, 31-20. 4th consecutive win for the Maize and Blue to retain the Paul Bunyan Trophy, the longest win streak for Michigan in this series since the early 2000s, 2002 through 2007. That was 6 straight wins for the Wolverines. And although Michigan State scored with 7 seconds remaining in regulation to make it an 11-point defeat and to cover the number and to bring the total through the over, it was really Michigan dominating for all 60 minutes, and where we thought Michigan would dominate with big boy Big Ten football that Michigan has gotten back to following the loss in Los Angeles to USC. Michigan dominated Michigan State on the ground, 276 rushing yards, the most in this series for Michigan since 1994. The first time in this series since 1994, 2 Michigan running backs in the game against MSU put up a century mark on the ground. Justice Haynes, 152 yards, multiple rushing touchdowns, 2 to be exact, his 3rd game this year with multiple rushing touchdowns. Jordan Marshall, 15 carries, $110 on the ground, and a touchdown as well. Where we thought Michigan would be able to exploit the Spartans, it's exactly where they did, to the tune of nearly 300 rushing yards. And Joe Rossi and his Michigan State defense brought some fight early, and you have to give them credit for recognizing their woes throughout the year. But MSU has now allowed at least 31 points in all 5 of their Big Ten games, and they remain winless in conference play. And Michigan State not only allowed Michigan to do what we all predicted the Wolverines would try to do and excel at, establishing the run and running the dang ball, Michigan State also got penalized 12 times in this heated and bitter rivalry to the tune of 105 yards. That can't happen. It certainly cannot happen at home in a rivalry game. It is a failure to prepare for the biggest stages of your season when you needed to throw everything in the kitchen sink at Michigan to maybe play spoiler, to maybe keep the game truly competitive for all 60 minutes, to maybe save your job if your name is Jonathan Smith, the head coach in his 2nd year in East Lansing. I said this on Saturday night. I will say it again in a few moments, but in our 4 down honors, we celebrate and highlight the positive of the best things we saw from a weekend. We react to the negative at the end of this section, so I'll save it for that. But I'll say this about Jonathan Smith right here, right now. It's not a matter of if, it's only a matter of when. In East Lansing, that the buyout is had and Jonathan Smith is no longer the head coach of Michigan State for reasons we will highlight in just a matter of moments. But we do highlight Michigan, its dominance on the ground, its dominance in the Paul Bunyan Trophy, keeping it for a 4th consecutive year. Iowa's dominance against Minnesota, one-sided rivalry games, 2nd down honors in 2 spots. 3rd down honors, once again, goes to Demond Williams Jr. Demond dazzles again as Washington crushes Illinois 42-25 in a critical Saturday afternoon in Seattle. The quarterback for the Huskies continues to put up those dazzling performances that results in big victories. Stat line for Demond Williams Jr. against the Fighting Illini: 26 of 33, only 7 incompletions, 280 yards through the air, 4 passing touchdowns, and still showing off the athleticism, 10 carries for 66 yards on the ground. There have been 3 FBS games this year where a quarterback has put up a stat line of at least 275 passing yards, at least 4 passing touchdowns, and at least 65 yards running the football with a 75% completion percentage. 2 of those 3 games belong to one person, Washington's quarterback, Demond Williams Jr. Vandy's Diego Pavia has the other, by the way. The previous time Demond Williams Jr. did that was on the Palouse in the Apple Cup against Washington State. Demond Williams Jr. is the second player to have multiple games with that stat line: 275 plus through the air, 4 plus passing touchdowns, at least a 75% completion percentage, and at least 65 yards on the ground. Demond Williams Jr. is the second player in FBS history, dating back to when these stats were fully tracked, starting in 1995. Demond Williams Jr. is the second player in FBS history to have multiple games with that stat line, joining only LSU's Jaden Daniels, who had 2 such games in 2023. What did Jaden Daniels do in 2023? He won the Heisman Trophy. Demond Williams Jr. is putting up Heisman caliber numbers. Demond Williams Jr., unfortunately, will not really be in Heisman consideration in 2025. If he returns to Seattle, and I believe that he will, if he returns to Seattle, Demond Williams Jr. is going to be, and absolutely should be, a Heisman Trophy frontrunner and favorite in 2026. And I believe if Washington nationally was given the credit that it absolutely deserves for the quality of wins on its resume this season, well, then the Huskies would be ranked in the top 25. And if they continue to win these monumental football games, would probably have a good shot of being in the college football playoff conversation as a 9 or 10 win Big Ten football team, with its quarterback putting together unbelievable and historic performances. And then maybe Demond Williams Jr. would have more of a consideration in the Heisman Trophy race, more so than the 200-1 number that he has entering November on the FanDuel Sportsbook, which is absolutely ridiculous, because the play and the production in what it means for Washington is so much better than being what would be considered a long shot at this point for Heisman Trophy bids. Also big for Washington in the game, making plays when necessary on the defensive side. We highlighted why both offenses will probably have some success and why both defenses, that under Ryan Walters for the Huskies, where he was formerly the DC for Illinois, now it's Aaron Henry in a 3rd year, kind of the issues for both teams defensively. The offenses would put up some points. They scored 42 for Washington, 25 on the other side for the Illini, nearly 70 combined, but it was Washington's defense intercepting Luke Altmaier twice. More interceptions in this game than he had entering this game in his first 7. 3 INTs now for Altmaier, all 3, I should say, coming in the last 2 games against Ohio State and against Washington. Altmaier had no picks thrown for the first 6 games. The defense did just enough for UW on Saturday to make the plays when it matters. It was our key matchup in this final game. Washington comes through, and Demond Williams Jr. is probably the best quarterback that you do not know enough about. It is truly remarkable and frankly historic what he has done for the Washington Huskies so far this season. Now let me just tie all of this together. Iowa and Washington are in the receiving votes category in the AP poll. I have said it numerous times. You have heard me say it here. The AP poll has become an absolute joke. I don't really blame the AP voters. They're often local college football beat writers that are doing a bajillion things on a game day. They don't have nearly as much time as even the casual fan to sit on their couch and watch YouTube TV with multi-view options to really get a sense of what is happening all around the country before they are supposed to fill out their ballot. But the issue with that is the AP poll still frames perception nationally as it should, and the AP poll is what we currently use. Until there is a better system, the AP Top 25 shapes the conversation around college football all season long until we get to November in the college football playoffs. It is the best of what we have at this current moment, and thus we need to hold it to a high standard that these rankings absolutely do matter, because they do. And so for the Huskies and the Hawkeyes to just be in receiving votes category, despite both being 6-2, despite when you look at the losses for Washington at home against Ohio State and against the top 20 team on the road in Michigan, Iowa in a bitter rivalry game early against an Iowa State team on the road in Ames, and against the number 2 team in the country, and that was only a one-possession game for both of these teams to make the statements they have in wins, because wins should always, always, always matter so much more significantly than losses. For Washington and Iowa to be where they are with the lack of respect in the AP poll boggles my mind. We've got 6-2 teams in the Big Ten in Iowa, Washington, and Nebraska. And Nebraska has a win over a top 20 team in Cincinnati on a neutral field this year. We've got teams in Nebraska, Iowa, and Washington that are all 3-6-2, sit on the outside of the top 25, and frankly, aren't even all that close to really being 23 through 25, sitting on the outside looking in, while we have a variety of SEC teams, Missouri, Tennessee, I could go on, that are in the top 20 with crappy resumes. 6-2 teams that the best thing about their resume is the losses, is the 2 losses that both Mizzou and Tennessee have suffered through this year, because Tennessee and Missouri have not beaten a power conference team that has a current record above 500. Wins should always matter more. Doesn't seem to be a controversial statement, and yet in college football, it has become exactly that. Give Iowa and Washington their credit, rank them in the top 25, and if you were to rank Washington inside the top 25 and give them a realistic path, because both certainly do. If they continue to win big football games, both will see Oregon before the season is through. If Washington and or Iowa continue to win these critical football games, they should very much be in the college football playoff conversation. And if they were, maybe players like Washington's quarterback and Damon Williams Jr. continuing to put up historic performance after historic performance might be in the Heisman Trophy conversation. All right, 4th down honors goes to Rutgers. Why? Because the Scarlet Knights get their first Big Ten win in an absolutely wild and chaotic game on Saturday in Ross-Ade Stadium in West Lafayette over Purdue. Rutgers gets conference win number 1 of the year. The Boilers still searching for that first Big Ten win under Barry Odom. 27-24 the final score. I'm going to quickly try to do a recap here, because you can all see the box score. You can all go watch the highlights. But just to put it into context, Purdue had multiple 10-point leads, double-digit leads in this game. 10-0 late into the first half before Rutgers scored their first touchdown before the break, 17-7 in the third quarter. Purdue actually scored on its opening offensive drive of the second half. And again, some of that creativity under Josh Henson continues to be there. Back and forth they went. Rutgers answered. Purdue answered. Rutgers took a lead with 7:45 remaining. Purdue answered on the ensuing offensive possession to take the lead back with 4 minutes and 43 seconds left. And then after Rutgers tied the game after Rutgers was driving to tie the game, or maybe even take the lead, Purdue in the final 2 minutes made a huge goal-to-go stop, standing tall near the goal line. 3rd and goal from the 5, no good for Rutgers. Jay Patel comes on, knocks in the game-tying field goal from 20 yards out, tied at 24, all with just about 60 seconds remaining. Ball goes back to Purdue on their ensuing play, the very first on their ensuing offensive possession. Ryan Brown, Purdue's quarterback, who did play and played a lot, by the way, despite some of the injury status we had going into the game. Ryan Brown throws the ball. It's batted by a defender at the line of scrimmage. Goes back into the arms of Ryan Brown. He catches his own pass. He takes a step with it, and he is stripped. He loses the football. Rutgers recovers the fumble, setting them up in prime field position and setting up the clutch Jay Patel for a 31-yard field goal for the win. And that is exactly how Rutgers came through for their first Big Ten victory of this season. You saw the reaction of Greg Schiano, who is very stoic often, celebrate down to his knees on the turf, on the grass in West Lafayette, understanding how critical getting that Big Ten victory can be for a program. And Rutgers gets its 4th win of the year. And Rutgers will have some opportunities down the stretch to maybe win another or maybe another Big Ten game to flirt with bowl eligibility under Shiano once again. But with Purdue literally coughing up the opportunity, the Boilers seeing that game slip through their hands again, it's the sign of a rebuilding team that still has a long way to go to learn how to win a football game, not just be fun, not just be competitive, not just be creative offensively, but actually do the things necessary, like take care of the football to win a game in the Big Ten. It does not get easier. The month of November, as we shared in the Week 9 pregame show, at Michigan next week, hosting Ohio State, a bye mixed in on the road to Seattle to take on a trending upwards Washington team in the bucket game against Indiana to end it out. There's a very likely chance, and the odds will reflect that Purdue goes winless in power conference competition again in Big Ten play for a second consecutive year. And you were hoping that in year 1 under Barry Odom, you could get one of those victories to really kind of be at least something to look forward to as you are building up the program in West Lafayette. Sadly, not the case for Purdue, but for Rutgers, a necessary win and a win that they got. They made the plays when it mattered, and Purdue is still trying to learn exactly how to do just that. So those were our 4 down honors. Indiana's utter dominance, belt to you-know-what each and every week and never missing a step. 2nd down honors to both Iowa and Michigan for their roles in dominant one-sided rivalry games. Iowa beating Minnesota 41-3 to retain the Floyd of Rosedale Trophy, the best in the sport for an 11th time in the last 12 meetings. Michigan winning its 4th consecutive game against Michigan State to make sure the winged helmet stays on Paul Bunyan's trophy. 3rd down honors, dazzling Damon Williams, who I believe deserves more national recognition, celebration, and maybe even Heisman consideration, as Washington beats Illinois in Seattle 42-25, and Rutgers earns 4th down honors for its first Big Ten win of the year. We mentioned the game for Michigan and Michigan State. I said I would get to Jonathan Smith. Let's get to Jonathan Smith. Hand up. I'll start, as I said last week, when I maybe speculated with an early recording that there could be some breaking news that I might not be here for. It does not seem as though we will get breaking news on this Sunday. I'm not so sure we will get breaking news out of East Lansing, leading to the change at the head coaching position of their football program until the end of the 2025 campaign. But it's not a matter of if, it's only a matter of when. It's only a matter of time for when Jonathan Smith is looking for a new job in Michigan State under new athletic director Jay Batt is looking for a new football coach. There has been some interesting times for Michigan State. You can say in the last 3 to 4 years of their football program, the disaster that was the end of the tenure for Mel Tucker, what we have seen now here under Jonathan Smith. And maybe if you are not the oldest Big Ten fan, you forget the heydays of Mark D'Antonio in East Lansing when this team was rightfully contending for Big Ten championships. You hear this out of Tom Izzo. You should hear it out of the athletic department. You should hear it from Michigan State fans. They have one of the largest alumni bases in this country. They have the money, they have the resources, and they very well should have the backing to be a top-tier successful program in the Big Ten, football, basketball, and otherwise. I truly believe that about Michigan State. And I know fans of the Spartans believe the same too. It is why what we are seeing out of the Michigan State football program in year number 2 under Jonathan Smith is unacceptable. It is not just losing games. It is not just being 0-5 in Big Ten play. It is the lifeless efforts that the Spartans are putting out against conference competition. The defense has not improved. In fact, it has taken a step back. Joe Rossi can show you all the energy and passion that he is trying to coach with. It's not there. There's no belief in the head coach. There is no confidence relayed to his team. In those moments, it does not seem as though Michigan State even believes they can win these football games. Heck, maybe even keep these games remotely competitive. Jonathan Smith's demeanor is not one of a brazen Dan Campbell out there riling up the troops. It's not who he is. It is not his personality. And maybe it works in different places. Maybe it works in different scenarios. Maybe it works in different settings. It is not working in East Lansing. I praised the hire of Jonathan Smith by the Spartans just a few years ago for the turnaround that he had at his alma mater in Corvallis for Oregon State. I believe that winning football translates over levels, translates over leagues, translates nationwide. It is not here. For whatever reason, I can't really point to. But when you see 12 penalties to the tune of more than 100 penalty yards in a rivalry game when you are at home, you have failed to prepare your team to play with the necessary emotion, to keep a game competitive, and to instill that belief that they're not just there to stick around with the rival, but they're there to pull the upset. They are there to change the narrative of what has become, in the last 4 seasons, a one-sided rivalry. That, in the decade and a half prior, was often one-sided. Michigan State, prior to this 4-game win streak for the Maize and Blue, had won 10 of 14 in the Paul Bunyan Trophy series. What we saw on Saturday ain't it. It's not. And so for me, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It's a matter of timing for when the decision is ultimately made. I do not believe the buyout, although large, about $31.5 million reportedly, if he is fired before February 1st. It would be the 4th largest in the history of college football. I say 4th largest because as I am recording this, I think Brian Kelly is getting fired in Baton Rouge by LSU, or ultimately that is going to happen at some time during this Tigers bye week. It's a lot of money to fork up, but you cannot allow the product that has been seen on the field in Spartan Stadium in a rivalry game, and even a few weeks prior against UCLA, to be the ultimate vision of what your football program is trending toward. Because there is not a belief. There is not a fight. There is not even an idea of, hey, we are keeping this game close. And maybe next year we take that step over to keep a close game close and win it. It's not happening. It's regressing. It's working backwards against this Michigan State team. And thus, I think the end is near for Jonathan Smith. Might not be this week. Might not be today after I finish this recording. Might not even be before the end of the 2025 season. But I do believe it is coming. 2 more games to get to here on the Week 9 postgame show on Big Ten Breakdown. This final category is called Perhaps Closer Than We All Expected. We start with a spot that maybe it wasn't all that much closer than we should expect because, as we have shared, Nebraska and Northwestern, as conference foes, play close games. 12th time meeting as Big Ten mates. It was the 9th time on Saturday in Lincoln. That game was decided by 1 possession. Nebraska, though, does edge out Northwestern 28-21 to get to that 6th win, to get back to bowl eligibility in back-to-back seasons for the first time since 2015-16, and to do so with 5 wins, which has often been precarious for the Huskers by the end of October. And again, it felt like at times a Nebraska game where they are playing it closer than it should be. They're making the plays that they shouldn't to maybe lose a game that they ultimately should be on the winning end of. Nebraska led 21-6 midway through the 3rd quarter. Kenneth Williams, the Lincoln native, or at least the Lincoln High grad, has been a revelation. He had earned a scholarship after his monumental performance a few weeks back against Maryland. He showed that scholarship has been well-earned and well-deserved with a 95-yard house call to open up the second half. Nebraska then scored another touchdown. They led 21-6. Northwestern responded, scoring 15 straight points, including a Caleb Komalafe house call from 56 yards out with just under 11 and a half remaining in regulation. The teams then exchanged a couple of picks from Dylan Raiola and Preston Stone, and when Nebraska got the ball back, they put it together. 13 plays, 60 yards, 6.5-minute drive that resulted in Emmett Johnson finding pay dirt for his 2nd time of the game. Nebraska perhaps got away with a holding call on Griffin Willoughby on a critical 4th down stop from their own 35-yard line, but Northwestern had some penalties go their way as well. It was not a great refereed or officiated game on either side. That's how it goes at times in college football. It's a true issue. Officiating has been a problem and certainly continues to be. But ultimately, when the plays needed to happen, Nebraska made some. When Northwestern was starting to make some, and the game seemed as though it was starting to slip away from the Huskers again. But that has been a change this year, in year number 3 under Matt Rule. That, the 28-21 win over the Cats, was the 3rd one-score victory for Nebraska this year. As many one-score wins in 2025 as the previous 2 years, 2023 and 24, under Matt Rule. The first time Nebraska has won 3 one-score games in a single season since 2016, which, of course, prior to last season was the last time the Huskers went bowling. There are still some issues with Nebraska and still some strengths for Northwestern, despite their 4-game win streak getting snapped. It's the ground game for the Cats. It's the issues for Nebraska's defense in containing the opposition's rushing offense. 172 yards for Northwestern on the ground. But again, it's those signs of progress for Matt Rule in year 3 to get to 6-2. Nebraska now has another sign of progress. An incredibly significant November game on the first day of November at night under the lights in Lincoln in Memorial Stadium against USC and Lincoln Riley, who, despite being on the bye, moved up 2 spots in the AP poll. They're the number 23 team in the country. Yet another opportunity for the Huskers to snap their 28-game losing skid against ranked foes. Also a time for USC to snap their 11. Well, Nebraska's not going to be ranked, but USC has had some issues on the road. At least a 7-game losing skid, I believe, for USC under Lincoln Riley when they have had to travel 2 or more time zones. Pacific, Mountain, that's 2 to get to Central in Lincoln, Nebraska. Critical game. We'll preview it all on the Week 10 pregame show. The game that was truly closer than we expected in a downpour inside Autzen Stadium on Saturday in Eugene, Oregon and Wisconsin. The Ducks winning by multiple scores, 2 touchdowns, 21-7. But as a 31.5-point favorite, we thought Oregon would manhandle Wisconsin the way they manhandled Rutgers and Piscataway the week prior. Wasn't exactly that. Kudos to Wisconsin's defense, and the Badgers scored for the first time in 3 weeks. For the first time in basically 21 days and nearly 10 hours, the Badgers hit pay dirt with about 7 minutes remaining in regulation, or about 8 minutes left in the game. Also kind of weird for Oregon. It was a downpour. Both teams were really trying to run the football as best they could. Oregon had 203 rushing yards. Hunter Simmons' stat line for Wisconsin was not great, but the quarterback on the other side for the Ducks, Dante Moore, got injured early in the third quarter, basically got clotheslined, and I think had a nose injury. I'm not exactly sure what the official diagnosis was, but he left the game early in the third quarter, did not return. How about the redshirt freshman walk-on from Sheldon High School in Eugene, Brock Thomas, who his dad played at Oregon in the late 80s. His grandfather played at Oregon as well, a third-generation Duck, and maybe even further beyond that, but at least for the football program, Brock Thomas came in, who started off 2025 as the 4th-string quarterback and filled in relief duty and was perfect. 4-4 through the air for 46 yards in his first career passing touchdown that went to an offensive lineman for Oregon as well. Again, Oregon did just enough to win the game in a downpour. Wisconsin's defense, I have said often this year, probably does not get the credit they deserve. The onus has been solely on them, even with the Badgers scoring their first touchdown in 3 weeks. The defense has had to do everything. And Wisconsin's defense was pretty good. Oregon scored with just over a minute in the first half. That game was largely scoreless and an ugly old Big Ten West game in the showers in Eugene. That's what Wisconsin has done to Oregon. Weirdly, 2 very competitive games as conference foes each of the previous 2 seasons when Wisconsin's been putting up duds prior. Wisconsin's defense deserves a little bit more credit. They won't get that credit, and at times they have had to break a little bit because of how bad the offense has been, and all the pressure is on them, and all the time spent on the playing surface is on that Badgers defense. As we know, Chris McIntosh kind of gave a little bit of that vote of confidence for Luke Fickell, or at least a statement that says we are not making a move in the foreseeable future. Luke Fickell is there, I think, probably into 2026. I don't necessarily agree with it, at least through the remainder of 2025. Wisconsin had a brutal month of October, gets a little bit easier in November. Maybe there's a Big Ten win coming for the Badgers. They are winless right now. We shall see. That does it for the Week 9 postgame show here on Big Ten Breakdown. We are back on Friday for a Week 10 pregame show. Only 6 games on the opening Saturday of November. And perhaps it was a November 1st slate we were more looking forward to early in the year because it's Ohio State and Penn State. Both teams coming off a bye. One team has lived up to its preseason billing as the reigning national champs and still the number 1 team in the country, that being Ohio State. Of course, Penn State, one of the great disappointments of the 2025 college football season and recent memory. That's got a much larger spread than we expected earlier in the year, but some really good games across the Big Ten for that opening Saturday in November, the final full month of the regular season. This is when each and every game adds on that additional layer of importance that we started to detail here to end out October. Week 9 post-game show in the books, and Week 9 of the Big Ten Conference also is over and through. Week 10 on the horizon. We'll talk to you on Friday. I am Ben Stevens. Thanks for joining. Thanks for being here as always.